I grew up Jewish. I grew up in a Jewish household, born and raised. When you're young, you just think, oh, Zionist. Most Jews who are around you are Zionist, especially in America. That's just the fact. And our counselors were Israeli soldiers from the IDF, yeah. There is, and was, I remember when I was there, an anti-Palestinian sentiment, an anti-Muslim sentiment.
Here, get the out of the country. This is Jewish country only. We don't need Muslims here.
There is no permission from the Torah to have any mercy.
Before the ships came,
2 former American vessels carrying nearly 4,000 Jewish refugees arrive at the port of Haifa, Palestine.
And the Muslims and Jews were there living in peace.
And we went from Italy to Palestine. It was not Israel yet, it was Palestine.
Yeah. In France, when the Nazis were coming to take the Jews, Muslims were forging documents.
He was just a prophet. Right?
No. We don't even believe he was a prophet.
What do you think he was?
So we're here with Jacob Yakub, who comes from a Ashkenazi Jewish background. You grew up in a Jewish household. You went to Hebrew school, studying with Orthodox rabbis. You even went to a youth camp, but it was, you distinguished, it was actually a Zionist youth camp.
That's right.
And we'll talk a little bit about your background, some history. We'll try to dispel some of the myths. People right now, with everything that's going on in Palestine and Gaza, they're trying to make this Muslim-Jewish things, like Muslims want to eradicate all Jews. You being someone who comes from this background, you can help us to have a good, nice context understanding of this. Inshallah, God willing.
Inshallah.
This is the Deen Show.
I love you very much, all the work that you're doing.
When I was ready to talk about it, I would only talk to you.
And I was explaining how much respect I have for the faith of Islam.
Welcome to the Deen Show. The Deen Show.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
So, let's start.
Okay.
Tell me, you're in a nutshell, just for the people that didn't see the program that we done, your story. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So, I grew up Jewish. I grew up in a Jewish household, born and raised here in Florida, and not too far from the Dean Center, maybe an hour away. And I grew up, mostly secular, but I didn't have no connection to my religion. I was constantly involved with learning Hebrew, learning about Judaism, learning the Torah, and learning all the traditions and customs. And I went, from first grade onward, I went to, an ultra-Orthodox, they call it Chabad here, Hebrew school. And I learned Hebrew from them, and I went to a lot of events there. And, later on I started going to a Reform synagogue, so going from, I guess, the top of the religious totem pole to the bottom, where it was mostly secular. Still going, Friday night services and learning all the prayers, and I had my bar mitzvah. And, but as I was growing older, I didn't have as strong a connection because I felt that there were just some things in Judaism that they weren't explaining to me about how life was and how it was supposed to work. It always felt like they just kept going against what they were teaching. But as growing up, I did also go to this Jewish summer camp, and it was in North Carolina, and they, it wasn't really a surprise that they were a Zionist organization. When you're young, you just think, oh, Zionist. Most Jews who are around you are Zionist, especially in America. That's just the fact. Most of them are very pro-Israel, and they think it's their homeland, and so on and so forth. And we grew up like that's just second nature. So, going to this camp, it was, Jew-ish. They still kept the Sabbath. They made sure, no electronics, nothing's happening during Sabbath. Is a day of rest. You're not learning, you're not working, you're just enjoying. Every morning you go and you pray, and you have the same prayer service, and then on Friday night and Saturday morning, that's the Sabbath. You go to pray, and it's very involved. But during the day, what you're learning, aside from just having the same activities as any other summer camp, swimming, sports, rock climbing, going in the lake, you're constantly being fed Israeli, everything about Israel. You learn Hebrew same thing. You're learning more conversational, like words here and there to use. But they teach you about Israel. They teach you about the geography of Israel, the history of Israel. They even during they have color wars is a very popular thing during those summer camps where, there are like 4 teams or so on, and they all fight against each other with sports and activities. But they always have a one event or theme that they go around. And I remember one of the years the theme were Israeli heroes, and they're all war soldiers who fought in most of these battles against Muslims, and they treat them like they killed terrorists the entire time, and they teach about. So they kept, and our counselors were Israeli soldiers from the IDF, actively in. Of course, everyone in Israel has to go to the IDF, man or woman. I think it's men 3 years, women for 2 years, something about that. I don't know if it's changed. I haven't looked into that much, but I know
think
for
it's
sure.
2 years for men.
Is it 2 years for women, 1 year for women?
Something like that.
All I know is they have to be at least a certain amount of time.
They have to serve.
Exactly. Just to get training, and they're all active duty soldiers. If they're called in, then they have to fight. But a lot of the ones who came and were counselors they were in it for the long term. They actually came. They were boot camp training commanders. They were snipers. And
at this camp that you were part of,
in my cabin, I had. I remember one of the years, one of my counselors in the cabin was a sniper, and for bedtime stories, he'd tell about how he went on missions to assassinate the terrorists. I mean, I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
Whether he was or not is another question. I hope he was, but. Because maybe he was just trying to get us all thrilled. But the same thing goes. They were kind of spoon feeding us what we should think about Israel. And I went to Israel in 2012. I went to.
You visited Israel also?
I've been right before my bar mitzvah, and so I saw with my own eyes.
So you were bar mitzvah also.
That's right.
What does that mean for someone who just doesn't know? What does that mean to be bar mitzvah?
Like a coming of age. You've become an adult. So in Judaism, you're of age to be able to read the Torah. You're actually able to study it now. And so a bar mitzvah is basically, you're leading that Saturday morning service on the Sabbath, and you're the one reading the Torah portion yourself. You're reading the Haftarah. You're giving the khutbah, the sermon about the Torah portion, and that signifies. And it's the same with women. Actually, they do the same thing. More so in I would say the lesser conservative, or Reform and conservative, and some Orthodox as well do it to the same extent. They call it bat mitzvah. And so they'll do the same thing. They'll get up on the mimbar, do the same thing. 13 years old for men and 12 years old for women. Usually for most kids, it's actually just a time to celebrate and have fun. It's just like a wedding. You'll invite all your friends and have fancy food and party. Really, it's a party. That's what it is like for. I've seen kids spend more money on their bar mitzvah than on their wedding.
Wow.
Or the parents, rather. So that signifies something. And I remember in Israel, I was studying my Torah portion. I was memorizing it. It was Deuteronomy, I think 22 or 23. And while I was there, one interesting thing, I remember being in the Golan Heights, which is the contested area where bordering Syria. And we went on a Jeep tour through it, and I remember there we saw barbed wire fencing, and we see a sign that says "Danger, landmines." So behind there were plenty of mines. It was a minefield, and he says, "You see our tour guide. You see in English and in Hebrew it says minefield, but in Arabic it says picnic area."
Wow.
So and it's not the only time that we kept hearing, don't trust the Palestinian taxis. They're going to rip you off. There is and was, I remember when I was there, an anti-Palestinian sentiment, an anti-Muslim sentiment.
Here, get the out of the country. This is Jewish country only. We don't need Muslims here.
And they were doing it in jest, but they weren't really laughing. They do it to.
So there was a minefield. And it was displayed minefield on the Israeli side, but then in Arabic, so in Hebrew.
He was joking. He was joking that in Arabic it doesn't actually say picnic area.
Okay.
But because if he's speaking to Americans,
yes,
he can fool them. But the thing is, they really do think that way.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right? They really think that they're just there. They're just extra. They're just there. Like, they don't mind playing around with the idea of.
Oh, he just threw that out there.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It was a joke, but they hold the sentiment.
Yeah. So how was your time at that camp, and then just in general, what was the education you were getting with what was going on with the neighboring state, the neighboring Christians, Palestinians, Muslim Palestinians there? How were you made to view them?
It really was, Israelis are your friends. Israelis are the ones who will take care of you. The Palestinians are not going to take care of you. They're going to take advantage of you. We learned about the war in Gaza. I remember while we were at camp, they had a ticket, like a daily counter of Gilad Shalit, the IDF soldier who was taken hostage. And they had a countdown, for every single day they'd move the counter of how many days he was captured for. So very anti-Gaza, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian rhetoric that was given there. Of course, they would never go into Islam as a religion, never. They just kind of lump them together. Most of the time they will just use the term Hamas. At that time especially, it was because that's when it all kind of started, where I was in camp at 2008, 2009, I think 2009, 2010.
Yes.
So that's when it was at its peak of this is new and this is a lot worse than what we imagined, at least in their eyes. So we were getting a lot of that rhetoric just put in front of us, and it actually inspired me in 2012 or 2013, that year, 8th grade. I decided we have a National History Day where usually social studies students who are in like honors class or something, they will do a project that takes up a good portion of their grade, and they take the day off and present it to people to judge. And it's just, you show a historical project, and that it has to determine some part of history, and I chose mine to be the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. My award was the most thought-provoking, because they can't really choose a side. But what did I end up discovering while I was looking into? I knew when I was 13 years old that it's not Israel is the good guy and Palestine is the bad guy. At 13, I was already like, okay, we have something going on here that is way deeper. It's enrooted in something way more chaotic, and just like Dan Cohen, you had him on not too long ago.
The other Jewish, also independent journalist.
Exactly. He was talking about
he's the filmmaker of Killing Gaza.
That's right.
Yes.
And talking about the history of Zionism. And
so you were already at that age thinking like there's more to this?
Yeah. And I of course I put it on the back burner. Ironically, I left early from National History Day to go to a Jewish youth event on the other side of Florida. But same thing applies. It was just at that point I had it in the back of my mind that it's not just left and right. It's not white, black and white, and there's a lot more to it. A lot more history that makes it not what you think.
Tell me this, so when you hear this statement that's put out there that Muslims want to wipe out Jews, or this is a Jewish-Muslim thing, what goes through your mind, being someone who comes from a Jewish background?
Well, I can tell you I had a lot of discussion with my family regarding this. Of course, my mom is still Jewish, and she grew up, she was part of Hadassah, the women's Zionist organization, and my family is all pro-Israel, and they continue to be so. That's just how they grew up, that's what they learned. But I've had discussions with my mom, and I've brought to light a lot of this history that makes it more clear that it's, when something goes against morality, it should be shown from, no matter who is at fault, you need to see that it goes against morality, which of course goes against Islam. Whatever goes against morality goes against Islam. So I'm bringing forward, this is what our religion teaches. Do not kill women, do not kill children, do not kill innocent people. And, you know, there's no, and so, you know, that's of course, I have to condemn any form of that, no matter what side that comes from. And no matter what, there is never a case where collective punishment is allowed. It's not like, it's not something that they are asking for. The Gazans never agreed that, you know, whatever Hamas does, we'll accept that. No, they know that they're in this situation where they're just trying to live their life. They're barely living in poverty. It's lower than poverty. They can't survive without the help of the UN. I mean, it's such a terrible situation, and, you know, may God give them a way out. So it's not something that, you know, if you look at history and the way that Jews were treated in you know, in the historical past with Islam, it was never like this. It was never, oh, you know, we're gonna you do a little thing to us, so we're gonna completely wipe you out. Mm-hmm. That's not how it was. It's, you know, it's supposed to be very balanced, and I'd love to talk more about that.
Yeah, let me get your reaction. So this is really important. So differentiating, I mean, it's very clear in Islam. How would you categorize, in your experience now, let's say rabbis like this who are coming out and they're quoting the Old Testament and they're talking about pretty much no mercy, and this is including children, right, innocent women, non-combatants.
There is no permission from the Torah to have any mercy whatsoever during war. Not on children, not on women, not on anybody.
How would you classify this rabbi with the rabbis that you learned from? We don't want to play that game like, oh, got you here, look, you know, and if there's something that's out of context, like they do with the Quran, they'll take one verse, they'll throw it out there, say, look, Islam is violent, but you just have to read the verse before and after it. Look at things in context. It's very clear. Non-combatants, not to be touched, rules of engagement, everything is just laid out, because we truly believe, like Allah says, that the Prophet Muhammad was sent as a mercy to all mankind. And we'll get into some of those examples of mercy where he was actually fighting anti-Semitism. And this wasn't even something at that time, because they're Semites also, right?
Exactly.
So it's crazy, but they were fighting this hate towards any kind of people.
Right.
So now, how would you classify this rabbi who's pretty much saying no mercy to anybody? Are we just not understanding him correctly, or how would you classify this type? Because this could be very scary, and we see what's happening now in Gaza. I mean, there's like no mercy towards any of the kids that are just being annihilated.
Right. I mean, I know what he was going to say after that. If you understand the point of this war, he's going to say, well, it's to fight idolatry. It's about fighting polytheism. And, you know, we as Muslims, we also our whole point is to, you know, is to strive to make monotheism the main message that everyone can learn about and can believe in and should believe in. But the way that he's saying it, no mercy towards women and children, that's not even in the Talmud. That's not in the Torah. They both explain the same way as the Quran, that they're to be secure, they're to be safe. And, you know, there are a lot of people who will reinterpret the Torah. That's what I learned. That's what got me out of Judaism in the first place, is constant reinterpretation of the Torah. I mean, you'll find rabbis all over the spectrum of what they believe about Israel, about Zionism, about Judaism, about how to interpret texts, how what should be followed as far as how do you on Passover, are you allowed to eat rice and beans, or it can only be it's something so separate, like, you know, little things here and there, but some of those things are not little at all.
But you have these verses in Deuteronomy, you have them where it's talking about when you go into a town, just pretty much women, children, annihilate everything. Have you seen some of these, right?
A lot of them are misinterpreted.
Misinterpreted?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, but now he's pretty much going and saying, giving the green light.
Yeah, well, I think the way I would classify it is there are three types.
Yeah, that's what you were saying before. There was three types of...
Yeah. The ones that follow, you know, the ones that are open to da'wah, the ones that are open to listening, that's, you know, you have people like Abdullah ibn Salam, who we talked about, last time, one of the first major rabbis who accepted Islam, you have Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, you have other...
That was the chief rabbi you just mentioned,
Yeah.
that during the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he saw that he fit all the descriptions of a prophet coming, and he accepted him, yeah?
Exactly.
Yes.
And he understood the real message of the Torah. And he didn't
That's
listen.
because he understood the real, okay.
He memorized the Torah.
Yeah.
He was one of the people who actually, he knew most of it, if not all of it, by heart. And there's a story I'll mention in a bit, perhaps, but because it goes in line with how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, treated the Torah and treated the Jewish people. But so people like him who they heard the message and they saw the stuff that the Jews at their time were saying, this is what we believe, this is how we interpret the text. He says, no, these interpretations don't make sense. They don't fit in line with how I understood from what was very clear in the Torah and other parts of the oral tradition, parts of the Talmud, because the Talmud's in two parts, the real oral law, and then the interpretation of that. Mm-hmm. And then the rabbis who are interpreting that are from the same time as Isa and Jesus, peace be upon him. We don't really know to what extent. I mean, I've read parts of the Talmud myself, and I have to say some of their interpretations are wacky at the least. Wacky.
Regarding?
A number of things. What's allowed, when it's allowed to lie in court, for instance, again, versus a Jew versus a non-Jew in court. A Jew can circumvent, or the judge can circumvent the non-Jew in favor of the Jewish person just because he's Jewish. He can try to slightly squeeze around the law to make it so the non-Jew gets convicted rather than the Jewish person.
Wow. I mean, that just shows you there. I mean, so this is in there. People can go check this out.
That's in the Talmud.
That's in the Talmud.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the story of one of the caliphs from the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, who came after Ali. And you know the story when he was the caliph, and now there was issue with him and the Jew, and they went to the court. Do you know about this story?
Remind me.
So they went to the court, and then, like, he's the head of state now. So as the head of state, you would think, now, hold on, the judge, the qadi who's there, he's going to rule in favor of the head of state. He's there, like, but then he actually ruled in favor of the Jew.
Right.
You know about this story, huh?
I've heard it, yeah.
Yeah, and then if I recollect correctly, the judge, he asked him, seems like you're upset about something, to Ali, the head of state. He says, yeah, because because he addressed him by his kunya or his nickname or something, almost seeing like that, like favored him a little bit. He didn't want that. He wanted justice, real justice all across. We have so many examples of this.
Exactly.
So that reminded me when you were talking about there's no slant towards, because you're Muslim, it's justice all across the board.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's it. There's justice. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And you can see that all across the Prophet's life. I mean, so the other two groups, the ones who, this middle one's quite interesting, the ones who stick with the Torah, but still don't believe in the message of Islam, right? But they don't lie, and they're not deceitful, and they don't try to circumvent or anything. They're a rare group to find, but you'll find one, like in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there was one by the name of Mukhayriq, and he was one of the leaders of the Banu Tha'laba, one of the tribes, one of the Jewish tribes there, and in Medina. And so, one thing that we know is that the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he moved to Medina, when he migrated to Medina to escape the persecution of the Meccans, he established, they made him the leader. But he established the constitution of Medina, which it was a defensive pact between every single tribe who was there. We defend you if you're attacked, you defend us if we're attacked, and we do not attack each other ever. As long as we're in this pact and you don't go against the pact, then this is the creation of a state. Really, it's they're creating a society, and so they're in this when the Battle of Uhud was taking place. most of it was happening on the day of the Sabbath, on Saturday, for the Jews, right?
Yes.
And so there's a statement in Judaism where you're not supposed to voluntarily go to war unless it's fully in defense of your own group. Most of the Jews of Tha'laba said, no, we're not fighting because it's the Sabbath. So they're going against the pact in favor of a preference that we prefer not to fight.
Mm-hmm.
But Mukhayriq, one of their leaders, said, you don't understand the deeper meaning of this. We have to fight. And it's been said, Allahu A'lam, we don't know if he really died as a Muslim. Some people say that he does, but it's more evident that he probably died still believing in Judaism, but he still believed perhaps the Prophet was even messianic in character. So he believed in his prophethood in a way, but in a different way than other Jews did, but still had a deep meaning that he believed in, due to what I read, actually some very clear interpretations, at least you could see from the texts of the later prophets. Anyway, he ended up dying in the Battle of Uhud. He was the first Jewish martyr of Islam, and he left an entire field of date palms, an entire garden of date palms, which he actually put in the name of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that ended up being the very first waqf, the first Islamic trust in all of Islam, in Islamic history. So, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said of him, he was the best of Jews. He honored him, even if he didn't die upon Islam. Again, we don't really know, but from the way it was said, he is the best of Jews, not the best of Muslims who became, it's pretty, it would seem that he just died upon his religion, but still honored him for that. So, because he honored the treaty, and he was there for them, and none of the other Jews ever fought for the Prophet ﷺ, except for maybe a couple. A lot of them ended up taking their shahada later. So that's that middle line, right? The rare version of that middle. It's just like Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. He never accepted Islam, but he defended the Prophet, right? So those two groups are super tiny. The vast majority are what you see in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, what you see throughout history, and it talks about them in the Quran like this. It's the group who distort their own and they interpret their own texts differently. They might add something to it or remove something from it to suit their own desires. Not that the text necessarily had to be changed for them to just omit it when verbally, they would try to teach they'll translate parts of the Torah in Arabic to teach some of the Muslims what they know. And then they'd come to the Prophet ﷺ and say, what is the verdict on it? And he says, don't affirm it nor deny it. Just say we believe in the books as they were revealed, or something along those lines.
Yes.
So
did that increase your iman, your faith? The more you study this, the more you looked into this, and now that when you talk to your mother or you talk to other people in your family, Jewish family, that now, are they clear at this? I mean, do they know like the history before the ships came?
2 former American vessels carrying nearly 4,000 Jewish refugees arrive at the port of Haifa, Palestine. Jammed like cattle on the rusty craft, the fugitives end their bleak voyage, which began at a Black Sea port.
And we went from Italy to Palestine. It was not Israel yet, it was Palestine.
Yeah. How did you went by boat?
By boat. We went to Israel when Israel was not Israel yet.
And people were coming to Palestine, and the Muslims and Jews were there living in peace, and Muslims welcomed. Anytime they were persecuted, Jews were persecuted, they were welcomed by the Muslims. Right. Muslims were actually helping to protect the Jews from anti-Semitism, from the hate that they were, and the persecution they were going under.
Right, even during World War II. You have Albania, who, amongst all the Muslim countries, they took a lot of European Jews and hid them and kept them safe. They I think suffered, as far as in Europe, it's the least.
See, that has me just thinking, if you know that, if that's like part of, that's clear. I mean, you have David Warnstein, Islam Saved the Jury, J.C. Essay, it's there in Jewish Chronicles. I mean, you have so many historians. It's just, you cannot deny this.
No.
In France, when the Nazis were coming to take the Jews, Muslims were forging documents for the Jews to say that they were Muslims too. So how can it's like, is this taught at all? Is this something that when you were growing up, did you learn about this?
No.
You didn't?
No. And only later realizing, the king of Morocco, when Hitler said, send your Jews to us, he says, we don't have Jews here, only Moroccans. It's kind of it's a statement, right? That look, our people are our people. If they're under us, they're ours. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ, he always did that. He never fought against Jewish people ever, except that they broke a treaty. Right? They committed high treason. Mm-hmm. It's the only time, and even then, he was always very, very. He gave them some leeway. In every case, he always gave them leeway. So, for instance, one of the most talked about story that non-Muslims love to bring up with us is the attack. So they say, it's the attack on Banu Qurayza.
Yes.
That has always been the most distorted story, I think, in the history of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is a defensive pact that they broke. And they weren't the only ones that broke it. All of them, the major groups, broke it. And Banu Nadir, they were just exiled for it. They were exiled, but Banu Qurayza, during the first instance of rebellion, they were given a pass. They said, it's okay, you guys can stay there. But then they broke it again and they started fighting again. How? It's not a one-time offense. They continue to. So from that point, the Muslims had to defend themselves, because the Prophet ﷺ said, I fear Banu Qurayza. He says, take arms. I fear of them. We need to defend ourselves. And eventually, they laid siege to the city, because first of all, they were they wanted to make sure that the Muslims were small, and they needed to make sure that they were safe. And Banu Qurayza was fighting alongside all the other pagan Arabs, and they needed to defend themselves. And so it was very clear. Once they had surrendered, they said, we defer our case to Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, one of the Jewish converts, who they trust. Mm-hmm. And what does Sa'd do? He says, I'll judge you based on your text. And he takes Deuteronomy 20, verses 12 through 14, saying, if the city lays siege on you, you lay siege on them, and continue to fight until they're done, until it's surrendered. And when you do, kill the combatants, the male combatants, and take the women and children as booty, as spoils of war, yes. And enjoy the spoils of war in the name of the Lord your God.
This is in the Bible.
This is Deuteronomy 20, verses 12 through 14. Yeah. It says it right there. It's Bible. You can't, if you're Christian, if you're Jewish, you can't say this is in the Bible. You can say, oh, I think they're fables. Like some popular people will say
that was the judgment that they agreed to, that was in their own text.
They agreed to whatever Sa'd ibn Mu'adh said, and that's the thing. He ruled based on what they would have done if the tables would have turned. Mm-hmm. If the tables would have turned and they fought based on their text, they would have done the same to the Muslims, because it's in their text. It's the Torah. They believe in it. Mm-hmm. They really do. So that's why they knew what was coming. Mm-hmm. They did. And so it's not the only time that, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that judgment was, I would say, justice was placed back in the hands of the Torah. Yeah. There was another moment, including Abdullah ibn Salam, where some people committed premarital relations, or outside of marriage relations.
Yes.
And in the Jewish tribe, and they asked the Prophet ﷺ to judge between them. And so
they actually came to him,
yes,
seeking judgment. Isn't that interesting?
They came to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, maybe they thought that he was going to be more lenient. Maybe he said, "Judge how you please." Maybe he thought they wanted to test him as to see if he was a prophet, because they kept testing him in different ways.
Yeah.
But he said, "What do you do? What do you rule?" And they say, "Well, we cover their faces with coal and we lash them, right?" And he says, "Well, what about the verses of an-najm, of stoning?" Because he knew about that. He knew. He'd heard about it. And they say, there's nothing in the Torah that says that. They said that. There's nothing in the Torah that says that. Abdullah ibn Salam was there and he says, "You are liars. Bring forth the Torah." And there's a very interesting hadith that isn't in the main ones, but it's Hasan, it's still good. And it's an addition to it. When they brought out the Torah, they actually went to the fort, the Jewish fortress. The Prophet ﷺ and Abdullah ibn Salam, they went to the Jewish fortress where they brought out the Torah. And the Prophet ﷺ was sitting on a cushion. And when they brought up the Torah, they were about to put it down on the ground, it seemed. He took out the cushion under his, from underneath him. He sat on the ground and then placed the Torah on the cushion, honoring, because he knew that the revelation from Allah was in this. This was a revelation.
This is what we had left of it.
Right.
Say, yeah.
Exactly. He knew that the revelation was in there. And he never wanted to, he always treated it with utter respect. And then one of the Jewish priests from that area came, started reading, but placed his hand over the part that talks about stoning. And he read from what was before it and after it. But Abdullah ibn Salam, he had already memorized the Torah.
Yeah.
So when he heard that, he says, "This is not correct." He lifted the hand from the guy who was reading it, and he asked the other Jewish people to read what he was covering up, and it was...
That was a scholar of Judaism who accepted Islam.
Abdullah ibn Salam.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So he called him out on that.
He called him out on that.
Wow.
Right? And so then the Prophet says, "That's your ruling. I rule based upon your book." And that's the end of the story. It's because they kept twisting and altering their religion. The Prophet he never cursed them for anything except for things that they did which went against what Allah has decreed for them.
So now you can see with all these games how the text, how it was changed in the past.
Right.
So what they had was altered because they're manipulating the text. And Allah calls them out. Woe to those who write the book with their hands, and woe to them for what they gain by that.
Right.
Allah is saying, see, that's why the Quran was sent.
Exactly.
The last and final testament, authentic, preserved, and we have it in its original. Right. And those who saw the fulfillment of the prophecy that's in their mention of the coming of Prophet Muhammad. Is that right?
Right. It's true. And Prophet Muhammad, whenever he heard, if Allah revealed something in the Quran, and then the Prophet, he would not deny if a Jewish person wanted to come in and seek his counsel. They would come in and they'll say, "I have heard. Do you wish to know about this? And this is what we've heard about the Day of Judgment. This is what we've heard about this." And they'll share the stories of what they know, and they line right up with the Quran. They affirm the Quran, and whenever the Prophet ﷺ would hear that, what would he do? He would start smiling and laughing, because he loves hearing the affirmation that he gets a revelation, peace be upon him, and he gets affirmation from what is previously revealed, that clearly was previously revealed. He doesn't dislike being in this vicinity, and so it's only in the cases when they were fighting against him, alayhi salatu wasalam, that's when he had to draw lines, but he never oppressed them, even when during the Battle of Khaybar, for instance. And that's where Banu Nadir and because they broke their treaty the same way. They went and they fought, but then even after the fighting, they let them stay on the land, and they just shared in the crops. Because they asked, "Can we stay here?" They said, "Sure." They asked, they got leniency. They didn't say, "Please let us be," and they say, "No, you all need to die." That's not the first time that happened. The consistent leniency, whenever any type of intercession, whether from them or from someone else, they say, please have mercy on them, there was always mercy.
So this is totally false. It's a lie. It's something that's perpetuated by people who have just no historical context, no historical references to this. And it's clear as day for anyone who looks into this. Muslims, because Muslims historically do not have a history of persecuting Jews. They don't. Actually, and this is not to step on any toes from our Christian friends and neighbors, but it's actually the Christians who are persecuting the Jews.
Definitely.
If you want to go down that
comparison,
route. So Muslims don't have, and this is just historically, this is the facts.
Right.
And we're not trying to hurt nobody's feelings, but it's a strange relationship now that a certain group of people who were protected and they ran from persecution from the Christians. Now, I don't know, maybe some of the Christian Zionists have this guilt now, and now they're actually supporting the injustices that are happening against innocent human beings. So the whole love is out the window. And I don't know if you know much about the prophecy that they're pushing to try to be fulfilled from both. So you have a Jewish prophecy trying to fulfilled. And do you know anything about this? And then the Christian, can you elaborate on this?
I think the majority of it come from the Seventh-day Adventists, where they believe that a lot of these groups, and they're not the only ones. There are other religious groups as well that believe that it all comes down to the coming of the Messiah. Whatever happens then, it's like once the Messiah comes, once Isa alayhi salam, once Jesus, peace be upon him, we believe he will come down and fight the Antichrist, a Dajjal, right? Now, whoever is a partisan with the Messiah, they're the ones who are going to wipe out the evildoers. So, for the Christians, they believe the Seventh-day Adventists. Once he comes, then all the Jews will be killed because all the Muslims will be killed, because they realize they were wrong, and that they're not even going to see that it's Jesus, and so on and so forth. I might be a bit wrong about this, but it's still a general principle, and the Jews have the same understanding of the Messiah. It's not necessarily the death to the same extent, except that the Prophet ﷺ, before his coming, the reason why they were in Arabia in the first place was because they knew that the last messenger was coming.
That's an important point.
Yes.
Why were the Jews around this area? Because they were expecting a messenger to come, the final messenger.
And they would keep telling the Aus and the Khazraj and the people of Yathrib, or Medina before it was Medina, they would tell them, once our prophet comes, we will fight against you and kill all of you.
They would say that
multiple times, consistently.
So then, why didn't they, when they saw all the signs, they knew that he was, like Allah said, they know him like they know their own fathers?
Well, I'd love to bring forth the story of Safia bint Huyay, the mother of the believers. May Allah be pleased with her. The wife of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Who was Safia? Well, her father, Huyay, was one of the chiefs of Banu Qaynuqa, one of the other, tribes in that area at that time. And while she was very young, she always her uncle and her father, they were very playful towards her. They gave her a lot of love. But there was one day when they heard about the Prophet ﷺ, they heard about him coming.
He was the chief Jewish leader of that tribe.
Yes.
Okay. So
she overheard them. After one day they realized that she wasn't getting any attention, so she decided to listen in on them. And they were speaking to her. The uncle asks the father, "Is that him?" And he'll say, "Yes, that's
after they went to go see him to investigate even further, right?
Mm-hmm. Is that him?" They said, "Yes, verily it's him. There's no doubt that it's him."
Even they confirm. This is coming from her testimony,
right? Yes.
Yes.
And and then he asked, "Are we going to follow him?" And and the father said, "No, verily he'll be our enemy until the end of time."
Now the question is why? Is it because he wasn't one of their own?
That's part of it, because they believed that. Partially because they believe any of the people of Ishmael, Ismail alayhi salam, if they came from his descendants, they believed them to be cursed in a way, or at least they believed
because he came from Ishmael.
Yeah, because they didn't believe Ishmael to be a prophet.
That's that racism now, that we're better than you. So is that's the main reason?
It's not better per se. It's that they already had somebody in their in the past of the rabbis basically interpreted things this way, to say that only prophethood only came stemming from Ishaq alayhi salam, and wouldn't come from another direction. They have already ruled out.
But they're confirming this is him.
They've confirmed everything.
Case.
But it's based on not just that, but also if he comes, what happens to their wealth? What happens to their society? What happens to the power that they had? They had the same issues with the Prophet ﷺ as the pagan Meccans. Same issue, right? What's going to happen to their wealth? What's going to happen to they had all this power in their society. I mean, they were constantly going between the Aus and the Khazraj, but there were a lot of Jewish tribes there. They had a lot of power.
Yes.
And so they used that and the distortions of their texts to affirm their position, right? But it doesn't take a lot of research to know. Abdullah ibn Salam didn't hesitate one bit. In fact, when he was asking, asking the questions, right? The famous hadith of how he became a Muslim. What's one of the first the first portent of the hour? What's the first meal in al-Jannah? How do you determine the gender of a child or the likeness of the child? But right after he said that, Prophet ﷺ said, well, Jibreel alayhi salam has informed me of these answers. And what was the response? Jibreel is the enemy of the Jews. Why did he say that? Because Jibreel alayhi salam always came with the bad news in their times, right? Always came with, the commandments of war. Always came with bad, so they considered him to be a bad omen because they believe in bad omens. And so, but the thing is that didn't deter Abdullah ibn Salam, because what was the response as well? The Prophet ﷺ then recites from the Quran, saying those who take Jibreel alayhi salam as an enemy, and continued. And from there, then he told the three answers that were extremely accurate, that only a really properly learned rabbi would possibly be able to know. So on the spot, Abdullah ibn Salam took his shahada and said, "Verily the Jews are liars. And if you were to ask them about me, surely they will invent a lie about me." And that goes back to that story that I remember talking about last time. At first he was the best of the best, and the second he took his shahada in front of them, he is the worst of the worst, and started creating lies about him.
Yes, when he asked them to ask them about me who I am.
Right. So
and then they confirmed he's the best of the best, and then after he exposed that, no, I accepted Islam actually. Oh, he's the worst of the worst.
So this goes to that whole third category, right? Of the worst of the worst. There's the unfortunate aspect that a lot of Muslims, they may not know anything about Judaism, but because of what's happening and because of misunderstandings of Hadith, like the killing of the Jews in the time of Ad-Dajjal, like they don't know it's about Ad-Dajjal. They just think, oh, we're going to be killing Jews. Like that's not how that works, and it's not who you see now, and it's a very, very vague statement. And you shouldn't just accept whatever you read as like, oh, you can interpret it yourself. No, you have to know the whole history of why would they be fighting? Well, it's easy. If the Jews don't believe in Isa alayhi salam, then who's the first messianic character who's going to come? It's going to be Ad-Dajjal. It's going to be the Antichrist. And he will come with everything that will confirm what they have, but distorted, because they've already had it distorted. So of course the Jewish people are going to follow Ad-Dajjal first. It's not even a question in my mind. That actually was one of the reasons why I was certain that Islam was the truth, because it explained how, right? And I knew that's how their understandings of the Messiah and how they interpret it, it would make sense. They follow it, at least from their time, and who knows how Ad-Dajjal will convince them. May Allah protect us. But that's just it. It's not that you should consider everyone to be your enemy. In fact, and this is what we're talking about, anti-Jewish sentiment, even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. When Safia was married to the Prophet ﷺ, right? Once she became married, because at first, she was she was seeking refuge in Khaybar, but then after the Battle of Khaybar, she was just there. And the thing is that she believed in the Prophet ﷺ. So while she was taken, really as a refugee, you could say, or captive, but the second that she sees the Prophet ﷺ, she takes her shahada. And the Prophet ﷺ was shocked. He says, why? And that's when you get the story. And they were married immediately. And while they were married, they were on their camel, right? And the camel falls down. And the Prophet ﷺ is sheltering Safia. But the women around say, may Allah do away or do something with this Jewess. At the time, and this is in the Hadith, this is Sahih, the women had anti-Jewish sentiment, even to the wife. This freshly married, fresh off the block, freshly married to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and that's how they treat her. There was even animosity between the wives at some times, and the thing is Safia had to maintain her honor, and so that's, unfortunately, it has nothing to do with Islam. It just has to do with preconceived notions. If there's this large group, but it's not the only people. Like, you just have a large group that makes up the Quran is always talking about the majority of a people, not all of them, because it says, and the believing Jews and the believing Christians, right? And it talks about the mercy of Allah being upon those who truly understand, and they're separate, right? It's not about, but it's talking about the people who corrupt and they do wrong, and that's what we're seeing now as well, So it has nothing to do with Muslims versus Jews.
I think we could put that to rest. And any person, if their heart and mind's open, they can see it. If they're looking at history, if they're looking at the text, stories that you're sharing with us, it's just pretty much very clear that this is not something that is a Jewish Muslim thing. Muslims do not have a history of persecuting Jews. And Muslims don't hate Jews. Muslims hate injustice.
Right.
Muslims want to live together in peace with Christians, Muslims, and whoever else is out there. As long as they're not oppressing you or stealing your home, stealing your land, obviously that's the issue here.
Right. And it doesn't mean that there's never injustice from any group. When you have a group of unrighteous people, whether they be Jewish, Christian, Muslim, if they're not going by morality, that which God has sent us, right? That which Allah has sent and revealed to us. If they're not going by that, then I reject that. Yes. And everyone as a Muslim should reject that. And so those people who look into history, they say, oh, look, the Muslims, look, they oppressed this Jewish group. Oh, they did this. And I say, look at the leader. Do we align ourselves with that leader? You say they're Muslim, but look more into it.
And you can go deeper. You have the most honored woman in Islam is a Jewish woman, Jewish woman, Mary, Maryam. It's a whole chapter named after her in the Quran, Jesus' blessed mother. Why would Prophet Muhammad go ahead and honor this Jewish woman, Muslim woman, who accepts, because Muslim is one who submits to the will of God. Jewish is just the nationality, right? How would you define, someone can be a Jew, that's their nationality.
Or ethnicity.
Ethnicity.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So she was of that ethnicity, but she was one who submitted her will to God, to Allah. She was a Muslim, and she's honored in Islam. Jesus also, peace be upon him, and you mentioned him a few times. I want to get your reaction to this.
From a Jewish point of view, where we don't believe in the divinity of Christ, I think that there you can make an argument that the Gospels, which were written,
he was just a prophet, and right?
No, we don't even believe he was a prophet.
What do you think he was? What do you guys think he was?
What do I think he was historically? I think he was a Jew who tried to lead a revolt against the Romans and got killed for his trouble, just like a lot of other Jews at that time who were crucified for trying to lead revolts against the Roman and got killed for their trouble.
Jesus, we'll conclude with this. We'll talk about this for a few minutes. This is a person who's on the front line. He's out there. I don't know if you know about this individual.
Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro, and he's stirring up a lot of hate.
Right.
He's not trying to de-escalate things. He's been known to call a certain group of people, Muslims, the Palestinians, pretty much animals, and he's kind of stuff that he's saying. So now when you come here towards Jesus, peace be upon him, what do you think in contrast with now you becoming Muslim, accepting Islam, what we believe about Jesus?
I know one of your previous guests had spoken about how there are a lot of different opinions on Isa alayhi salam, and there are different interpretations of how he should be, whether he's just a rabbi who taught, but maybe didn't go in line with
because he's what's his belief. If you ask him as a Christian, someone who follows him, and you love Jesus,
right.
You ask us, say we love him.
Right.
You can't be a Muslim unless you believe in Jesus. You go to the hellfire disrespecting him, but
right.
He's pretty much in a nice way. Is it not a consensus there that pretty much he's not coming out with it, but they believe that he's like in the lower depths of hell, Jesus?
Well, most Jews don't even really believe in hellfire.
Oh, they don't?
Most don't.
So what do they? What's the belief that Ben Shapiro would have about Jesus?
To be honest, Ben Shapiro, he follows the same line of rhetoric as every other ultra-nationalist Zionist. He's not following. To me, he doesn't follow pure Judaism because he doesn't follow the rabbinical. He was on Al-Aqsa. He was up there. He was one of those people who first went up there, and before what even happened a few weeks ago. I know there was a very popular.
He was there, right?
Yeah, and
stirring up trouble. Yeah.
Just because someone calls himself Jewish doesn't mean that they are the resounding voice. Like, which rabbinical school did he go to? Which yeshiva did he study in to get his? No, he's just. Of course, I am no scholar either. I'm just repeating, hadith and things like that. I am in no way learned, and I shouldn't even begin to say that. I'm probably made a lot of mistakes today. But he never admits to his mistakes.
That's the problem, yeah.
And
people take him as a Jewish, like almost scholar authority.
But he has no authority, and he doesn't understand his own religion. He's doing the same thing that the right-wing ultra-nationalist government is doing, which is reinterpreting the Torah. They're going against the ultra-Orthodox community there. They're oppressing the ultra-Orthodox community in Israel.
You think he's using this for his own benefit now?
I think he believes what he's saying, because he's in line with that group.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that he.
Are they equivalent to like the KKK of Christianity and the ISIS, Daesh? That people, how would you equate them? What?
They follow a similar ideological pattern, but that it doesn't mean that they're fully extremists. There are fully extremist Jews out there, the ones who are the settlers that are gunning down innocent Palestinians in the West Bank, in their illegal settlements. That's different than the ones who they just agree, but they don't necessarily. They're getting close to extremism, but they haven't crossed the main border as far as individuals go. A collective as the Israeli government and the IDF and what they're doing against the Gazans, like that, those are war crimes. It's not even a question.
Yeah.
They're war crimes, and it's it's unquestionable how bad it is, and how God doesn't put mercy in their efforts, and they're only gonna suffer for what they're doing in the future.
Do you think if Jews knew what we believe about Jesus, because they're waiting for a Messiah to come,
right?
Say this is the Messiah. He came. You missed it. He came already, but now, like when I was speaking to my last guest, Stanford Pass. He believes that if the sincere, those who are really looking for the truth, because now they have a twisted understanding about Jesus, because certain people have elevated him to a God, literal Son of God, and all these other made him divine, and that goes against the first commandment.
Right.
Right. But if they really look into Islam and they see, like, hold on, this fits the description of the Messiah, that like you obviously you accepted him then.
Right. I think part of it is I read the Bible before I read the Quran. And I didn't find anything in the New Testament that rose Jesus, peace be upon him, to that level. And, I don't agree with Paul. I don't consider him an apostle. I don't believe he saw Jesus, the real Jesus, in Damascus. I think he saw the shaitan in Damascus because he only saw a bright white light. But if you really see a prophet, we know in our, because of the hadith and how, the Prophet ﷺ says, if you see me in a dream, surely you have seen me. But that means he has to take the exact same form.
Yeah.
Every single, aspect of of how he looks must be seen. If he's a bright white light, he's not who he says he is. He had to have been the shaitan. So
the devil.
Yes. So I cut out everything after the 4 canonical Gospels, really. I mean, as far as the Pauline epistles go, if you just read, and of course, there's no, you could say, chain of narration of who said what they say it's divinely revealed. I say, how can that be when they're just people who heard this, and that, and it wasn't even in Aramaic, it was in Greek. Regardless of all that, all due respect to the religion of Christianity, but I saw flaws as I was reading the Bible, and I was open-minded. I was asking Christians about how to understand this metaphysically. But Jesus, peace be upon him, had said the first commandment, the first, if he was asked, if we're gonna, the most important thing to follow from the book, follow from the Torah, or the most important thing ever to know. He said the 2 things are the Shema, which is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord is one. And then the second thing is love your neighbor as yourself. And if that's it, and the first thing was pure monotheism, why would, and there's no proof of any Trinity, there's no proof there's no establishment of pure divinity. There's what you call the divine passive, which is voice, where you don't know if he was just speaking the revelation, the actual Injil that he was given, when we don't know whether it was a hadith or a narration from him, or whether it was a revelation actually from Allah, from God. So there's all this, right? And if you look into that and you really dive into that, whether you're Jewish or you're Christian, you'll find not only was he a prophet of God, he was one of the most truthful, one of the most peaceful, one of the most worshiping people. And he had this essence of pure monotheism.
Last question, we'll conclude with this. What would you say to an Israeli Jewish coming from that background, the same way we would also condemn? I mean, we talked about this earlier. We don't, human life is precious life. Doesn't matter from what background, race, creed, color. This is straightforward. So we don't have a problem condemning, any human life. This is clearly something that is evil. But now somebody, you've seen some of these videos mocking. Have you seen any of these mocking some of the people who don't have water, basic essentials for life, and mocking some of these deaf? What would you say to someone who maybe has taken a certain people who are your neighbors right there? They're your neighbors, and now you're taking them as animals, as dehumanizing. How would you get for them to look at the human element, to look at the human side, to touch their hearts? Coming from a background now, and you really know what Islam is, you know what being a Muslim is all about. How would you approach if you have a one-on-one conversation with someone who's of that mindset, the Zionist mindset, Jewish mindset? And you know what? It's just the camps they went through, like you. It's something coming up, right? But you have a lot of people who are also coming up, but they, like you, they looked and saw there's more to this, and they went and investigated, and they're talking a different tone. We can maybe play a video real quick that people can see. It's people from all different Jewish, Israeli backgrounds who are speaking up on behalf of the injustices that are happening, and they're siding with the Palestinians here. What would you say?
Well, I would say, if why don't you side with, or why don't you identify the side of your Israeli brothers who see the injustice? Why aren't you siding with them in seeing that killing innocent civilians, women and children, when children make up a third or more of the deaths that we see, the killings in Gaza, how is that justified? And you can't say, oh, they're going to become terrorists one day. No, they're not. The vast majority of people in Gaza, by every news source or every media who is actually in there, who's recording, they're not there. They're not training to, that's not what they want. And all they want is to end the oppression that's happening, end the suffering that's happening. That doesn't justify an attack on Israeli civilians. It doesn't. Because if they were truly innocent civilians, women and children who are dying, that's against our religion, and we don't side with that. But that doesn't mean that collective punishment is allowed. And under what case would you say collective punishment is? Did they ask for it? No, they didn't ask for it. Why would they ask for it? They're only trying to fight for their lives. They're barely hanging on as it is. I mean, all you have to do is stop listening to the same one-tone media. Stop listening to the people who you grew up with saying the same message over and over and over again. It's the same as following a religion. You're just following Zionism as a religion instead of following Judaism as a religion.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Ameen wa yak. I cannot leave without giving you a gift. If you're not yet Muslim and you're tuning in to see what these Muslims are talking about and you like a free copy of the Quran, go ahead and visit TheDeenShow.com. We'll take care of the postage and everything and get it delivered to you. And if you still have some questions about Islam, call us at 1-800-662-4752. We'll see you next time. Until then, peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.
I'm sure all of you know Eddie from The Deen Show, and I'm sure that you've all heard about the Deen Center. Now, you don't want to miss on this opportunity. The brother has been around for a long time. When I became Muslim, that was a show that I used to watch. It was one of the shows that I actually was interviewed on. And since then, I've kept in touch with Eddie, and we've cooperated and participated in many things together, alhamdulillah, by the blessings of Allah. Now you guys have to do your part. This is for the ummah. There's so many people in this world who need the message of Islam. But the question is now, what you're gonna do? What are you going to do with your money, with what you have? What are you going to do to help the ummah, to help someone who's been around for 20 years doing da'wah? You've enjoyed the shows, you've enjoyed the interviews, you've enjoyed. Now it's your turn. Support the Deen Center.